Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the educators here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and I'm so glad you're joining us today. Now, this program is slightly different only because this program we are pre-recording. It's still going to be airing on Wednesday, October 12th, but I'm recording it a couple days ahead. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't participate in our program because you can still text in or email your questions live because we'd still love to hear from you. So I'm not alone here in the studio. I have my friend Courtney, and they're going to put up a lower third that's going to have our phone number that you can text us and our email you can email us at. So if you have any questions or you want to share your observations or thoughts while we're exploring today, go ahead and give us a text at 562-286-1838. And then you can also email us. That's another way to reach out to us. You can email us at live@lbaop.org. So we'll leave this number up and email address up. It might go away, but it'll come back. So if any time you want to share anything, questions, thoughts, observations with us, we'd love to hear from you. Now, let's get started exploring because today we're going to be exploring plankton and jellies, or jellyfish, like these animals you see here. Now, you might be wondering, that sounds like a weird combination of animals, plankton and jellies. But there's actually a reason that we pair those two together, and that's because jellies are actually a type of plankton. Now, that might be surprising to you as well. So we're going to start by looking at plankton, breaking it down, and then we'll come back to these jelly friends. Now, I'm going to go over to my document camera, and I'm going to write out some words, because sometimes I think that's helpful for us to see those visuals. So I'm going to write the word plankton. Plankton. Now, I want you to pause for a moment, maybe close your eyes or just think, when you hear the word plankton, what does it make you think of? What comes to mind when you hear that word plankton? Now you might be thinking of the little cartoon Plankton from a popular Nickelodeon television show. So you might be thinking of an angry little animal, a plankton. Or you might be thinking of something that's really teeny tiny. And that's often the response we hear. When we think of plankton, we think of really tiny, little itty bitty microscopic animals. And that is true for some plankton. But not all plankton is tiny. So this word plankton doesn't actually mean tiny or small or microscopic like we might think. Plankton actually means drifter or wanderer. So what this word refers to is any animal that can't actively swim against an ocean current or a water current. So think about when you go into the ocean. Now, you may have been knocked over by a wave. I know that I've been knocked over by a wave before. Those waves can be really strong. But we are strong enough and we have the physical ability that if a wave is coming towards us, we can try and swim against that current, that wave, that water movement. We can swim against it. And most mammals, most bigger animals, and a lot of vertebrates, animals with backbones, we can swim against the current. But plankton, any animal in this category, if a wave is coming or the water current is moving in any direction, they can't physically swim the other direction. So if the water's going this way, that's where that animal is going to go. If the water's going this way, that's where that animal is going to go. So it doesn't actually refer to size, it refers to how the animal moves. Now, plankton do have movement, they have mobility, they can move different parts of their body, and we'll see that a little bit later, but they just can't actively swim against a current. So a jellyfish or a sea jelly, no matter the size, which some jellies can get really large, the largest jelly is called the lion's mane, and they can get about 100 feet long, but even at 100 feet long, that animal doesn't have the strength to move against a current. So plankton doesn't necessarily mean small, it just means it can't swim against the current. Now, there are actually two types of plankton in the ocean. We have zooplankton and phytoplankton. So these are two types of plankton. Now you might notice, I'm going to zoom out a little so we can see everything. There we go. That these two words, they share that plankton part. So we know that these two things refer to an animal or something that is going to be plankton, that is a drifter or wanderer. So it can't swim against a current. But one of these, zooplankton or phytoplankton, refers to plant plankton. So plankton that's an algae or a plant. And one of them refers to plankton that is an animal. Now, if you took a guess between zoo or phyto, which one do you think would be referring to plants? If you have an idea, you are welcome to text us in at 562-286-1838. But you're right, I agree, phyto. Think about photosynthesis. When we talk about plants and trees and flowers on land, we talk about that they grow using photosynthesis. They use sunlight for energy and it helps them grow. So this phyto or photo refers to the plant. So these are plant plankton. And then this one, our clue here is the word zoo. when you go to the zoo, you're looking for animals, not plants, right? So zooplankton or zooplankton, those are animal plankton. So a jellyfish, as an animal, it would be a type of zooplankton. Now, if we look at zooplankton, we can actually break it down into two types of zooplankton. There's something called marrow, and then all the way over here, holo. Now, I'm going to have Courtney put up a video of one of our touch pools, of our tide pool touch pools. So if we take a look here, excellent. So you might recognize a lot of these animals. Have you seen them before? This is a tide pool habitat. And this one is here at the aquarium, but if you live here in Southern California, you might see a lot of tide pools right along our coast. And we see a lot of these animals you might recognize. Do you recognize any of these animals? Yeah, I see sea stars right here. Oh, no, right there's a sea star. This one is an anemone, as is this one a sea anemone. And then this is a sea anemone. Oop, too far. And this one. And then let's see what else we have. Oh, down here we have a purple sea urchin right there. And another sea urchin down here. And then you may have missed it, but this is my favorite one right here. This is a sea cucumber. Now, these animals, they're not plankton, right? Because we can see here, these animals are not moving very much. And they have the ability to move in a different direction. They also have the ability to hold on. So a lot of these animals have suction cups, like our sea stars and our sea cucumber and sea urchin. So they can hold on really tight to the rocks, so they're not moving at all if the water current comes through. But I brought this up because when these animals hatch out of an egg, they are teeny tiny animals. They are so itty bitty that you may not even see them in the water. They are just floating and drifting. Floating and drifting, just like plankton. So there are some animals who their life starts as plankton, and then as they grow, they get bigger and stronger and they settle like a sea star. Now, if we go over to my document camera for a moment. So this word meroplankton here, this refers to animals that at some stage of their life, they are plankton, but then they change into another animal. Think about the word metamorphosis. Now, we talk about that a lot when we talk about animals like butterflies, right? Think of a butterfly. Is a butterfly its whole life? No, it starts as a caterpillar. And a caterpillar is not a caterpillar its whole life, because a caterpillar will walk around or crawl around on a leaf, and it'll munch on lots of leaves. It'll get really plump, and then it goes into its cocoon or its chrysalis, and it changes, it metamorphoses into a butterfly. So it starts as one animal, and then as it grows, its body changes into a completely different animal. And there are types of animals in the ocean, types of plankton, that start plankton, and then they change into something different. So we refer to those animals as meroplankton, just like we have here. And all those animals in coastal corner in our tide pool, the sea stars, the anemones, the urchins, the cucumber, even animals like crabs, they all start their life as plankton because they're so small, and the way they move is just floating through the water. But then eventually they grow too big, they're not floating anymore, they settle, and they're a different animal. So meroplankton refers to animals that are plankton at the beginning stage of their life, and then they change out of plankton. But this word holoplankton over here, this one refers to animals that are plankton their whole life. So they don't change at all. So I'm going to have Courtney put up a video of some plankton. It's going to kind of look kind of space-agey, which I think is kind of fun. But these plankton in here, these are different types of zoo, so animal, and phyto, plant plankton. And these are plankton that are going to be, oh, this is a great one, because this thing right here, you see a bunch of them. Oh, they're really fast. These are called copepods. Have you heard the word copepod before? Well, a copepod is a type of plankton, which means is a drifter or wanderer, and it's a holoplankton. So it is always a plankton. It always looks like that. From when it's tiny and born or hatched to when it's an adult, what looks like snowing there. They are always that copepod. They're always tiny. They're always drifters. So even in their adult stage, they still can't swim against the current. So they are holoplankton. They are always, their whole life, they are plankton. And this gives us a good look. Now, this is plankton that is really tiny. We are looking through a microscope here. But it gives you a kind of idea of how these animals, you can see them moving, but if a current comes through, it's going to push them all, and they're not going to be able to move in any other direction but where the water is taking them. It's Kind of cool. We like to refer to plankton as sort of like aliens because they're sort of really interesting animals. They've got lots of different shapes to their body. Oh, did you see that one go by? That was cool. That one that kind of went like this. That is the next animal we're going to talk about. Now, we broke down plankton a little bit. We talked about how plankton are drifters and wanderers. There's two groups. There's zooplankton and there's phytoplankton, so animal and plant. And then for the animal plankton, we talked about how some start as plankton and then their body changes to be a different animal. Or, like our copepods, they are plankton their whole life. Now, those are the rules, more or less. But in science, we always like to confuse you. So now I want to bring up the jellyfish, or the sea jelly. So let's take a look at a jelly for a moment. Oh, there's a jelly, right on cue. So the jelly. Now this is a picture of a Pacific sea nettle. And jellies are interesting because they sort of don't fall into those categories. They are definitely part of the zooplankton. They are plankton. They're zooplankton. But this is where it gets a little confusing for jellies because a jelly has different stages in its life. And sometimes it actually starts attached to a surface and then becomes free floating. So it doesn't really fall into the marrow or holoplankton categories because it is plankton its whole life, but its body does change. But let's start kind of taking a look at our jellies. Let's actually start. So we've got this picture of a sea nettle, but I'm going to have Courtney put us into our jelly webcam, we'll see these sea nettles, but we'll see them moving around. Excellent. So this is one of the webcams. Now, if you've tuned in with us before, you know that we have a lot of webcams in our exhibits here at the aquarium, and we like to use them for our Aquarium Online Academy programs, but you can also visit them at any time. They are on our website. Go to aquariumofpacific.org, scroll down. You'll have access to check in on our animals, even if you can't visit us. You can see jellies and sharks and a kelp forest and some coral reefs and even our penguins. But let's take a look at our nettles now, and let's start to make some observations. So we're keeping in mind, we know these are plankton, but they're a lot larger than tiny little plankton we were looking at before. What do you notice about our jellies? What observations can we make? Now, observations, that might be a new word for you. That is a tool that scientists use. And you are a scientist today. When you join us for Aquarium Online Academy, you instantly become a scientist. And the way we make observations is we look at something, and then we just describe what we see. It's one of the most handy tools, and anyone can use this tool. So let's describe what we see. So I see a lot of movement. Is that what you see? Do you agree? Yeah, so we see all these jellies moving around. Now, what we can't see is there is a water pump or there's a flow. So the water in there is being pushed by a machine in a certain direction, and that's helping our jellies to move in a direction. Because if there was no water flowing in there, the jellies would all just sink to the bottom. And that's not very good for them. I also notice the colors. What colors do you see? We've got some orange, so that's a characteristic of our Pacific sea nettles. There's different kinds of jellies. There's lots and lots of different kinds of jellies, and they all have different colors. But our Pacific sea nettles tend to be orange. It's a really cool, pretty orange right here. And that's the top part. We call it, even though it's the bottom of what we're seeing here, that is the top part of our jelly, and we call that the bell. So this circle part right here, this circle part here, is called their bell, and for our nettles, it's orange. And then I see some red as well. Did you notice that too? Yeah, we can see it right here on this one. They've got these red strings kind of all around the outside of their bell. You see on here too. And then they've got some like white fluffy parts in the middle. Yeah, there's lots of white fluffy parts. So those are different parts of the jelly. Now let's see if we can bring up a picture, a still picture of a nettle, and we can kind of break down the different body parts of a jelly. Excellent. This is a perfect picture. So this shows us the color, right? The orange, the red, and those white frilly parts. So I mentioned this top part is the bell. So that's the top. I guess you could call it the head of the jelly. Although it's interesting because jellies, they don't really have a true head like us. Jellies are missing some things that we learn you need to survive. Jellies don't have a heart, they don't have a brain, and they don't have a spine or a backbone. Which sounds kind of wild, right? I know that growing up, I thought that you needed all those things in order to survive. But jellies, they're able to survive off of a respiratory or a system to breathe, over a digestive, so they can eat food, digest it, and release their waste, and a reproductive system where they can mate lay eggs, and have babies to continue their species. But so here is more or less the top part of the jelly is the bell. And then these long tentacles, these skinny ones along the outside, those are their tentacles where they have stinging cells. So that's a characteristic of, we'll say, most jellies. There are a few species that either don't have stingers or their stingers aren't very strong. So like if you come visit us here at the aquarium, we have our moon jellies, and you're welcome to touch the moon jellies because their stingers are so teeny tiny and our skin is so thick that you won't feel it. But for most jellies, you don't want to touch them because they do have stingers in these tentacles along the outside. Now, jellies are part of a family. I'm going to give you a big word. That word is cnidarians, which is a weird word because it starts with a C, but the word is cnidarians. And cnidarians are jellies, anemones, which we looked at before, and corals. And they're related because they all have those stinging cells. So jellies have these stinging cells in those tentacles along the outside of their body. Now let's pause for a moment and think about, why might an animal like a jelly want to sting something? There's a couple of reasons. I can think of two. Can you think of any? Now remember, you're welcome to text us in at 562-286-1838 or send us an email if you have a question about their stingers or their bell or touching a jelly, or even if you have an idea of why they might sting. Now, one of the reasons I can think of is for protection, right? If an animal might be trying to eat a jelly because they might think, oh, a nice squishy snack would be delicious, the jelly's thinking, I don't want to be eaten. And so their stingers are used for protection. But the other side of that is to catch their food. So they can use their stingers to keep predators away, but they can also use their stingers to catch their prey. So jellies, you might be wondering what they eat. And most jellies will eat other planktonic animals. So while a jelly is floating, there's lots of other little floating things in the water as well. And those floating things are going to come right into their stingers. And then their stingers are going to fire those stingers to catch the food. And then they have to bring it to their mouth. Now, if the food is down here, how do you think they're going to get up to their mouth, which is up in their bell? Now, you might think maybe they kind of move those stingers up towards their mouth, kind of like in this motion. And that's a good guess, but it's actually what these frilly white things in the middle, where they come into play. So these things in the middle are called their oral arms. And once a jelly catches its food with its stingers, it's going to transfer the food onto these oral arms, and then the oral arms are going to bring it up to their stomachs. Now, I'm going to see if Courtney can bring up a picture of a moon jelly for us to see what their stomachs look like, because moon jellies, it's really easy for us to see their stomachs. Now, all jellies are going to have stomachs, right? Because they do need to eat. They have that digestive tract and then releasing their waste. But with our moon jellies, you'll see they're kind of a clear color, and it makes it really easy for us to see their stomachs. Now, you did hear that right. I did say their stomachs. Excellent. Perfect. Because jellies actually have more than one stomach. Now, if you're looking at this picture, do you have a guess of where their stomachs are? Knowing that they have more than one. Now, you might be wondering, I don't know where their stomach is, but I wonder what that flower pattern on the top of these jellies right here and right here is. Those are their stomachs. So jellies, especially moon jellies, but jellies in general, they have about 4 stomachs. Kind of looks like a flower on top. And I said about 4 because if you've been here to the aquarium, you may have noticed that we will see anywhere between 2 and 8 stomachs. Now, 4 is sort of the natural number, what they should have, but sometimes there's little mutations in their cells, and when they grow more or less stomachs. And they're totally fine and healthy. It's just fun for us to see if we can find a 5 or a 6 or 7 or the rarest 8 stomachs. But we do see it every so often. But there are 4 stomachs. Now, when I think about having 4 stomachs, I always think about what would I fill my 4 stomachs with? Because I think I would use them for different things. Like 1 for breakfast. I love breakfast foods like pancakes. 1 for lunch. 1 for dinner. And then you have 1 more stomach. And I would probably fill that last stomach with ice cream. What do you think? Send us in what you would fill your 4 stomachs with. Now, unfortunately for jellies, they can't decide to fill one stomach with one kind of food and another stomach with another kind of food and the third and the fourth with different things. When they're eating, they just fill all 4 stomachs with their food. So it's not like it's specialized like we might try and do if we had more than one stomach, but all their stomachs are going to take in all of their food. And our moon jellies, they eat something called brine shrimp. So their brine shrimp are a type of shrimp, really tiny, and they're pink. So sometimes when our jellies are eating, you can tell they have food in their stomachs because these jellies are pretty clear, right? which is why they get their name, the moon jelly. And if they have food in there, it turns their stomachs pink. So they turn the color of their food. So we can tell if our moon jellies have just eaten or if they haven't eaten a bit just because of the color on their body. Excellent. So jellies are sort of one of the most popular types of planktons that we see. So let's see, I'm going to have Courtney bring up a picture of another type of jelly for us to talk about. Excellent. I love this type of jelly. Now this one is really fun. So let's pause for a moment and just make some observations because this jelly looks different from the other two jellies we've looked at so far. We have looked at our Pacific sea nettles and we've looked at our moon jellies. But this one, which is called a flower hat jelly, looks very different. So what do you notice about this jelly? I notice the colors are different. Did you see that too? It's pretty striking how different the colors are. Yeah, so it's almost like this jelly is glowing. It's got this bright blue color and then green. Sometimes we'll even see it with pink. But I think the name really suits it. A flower hat jelly, right? It kind of looks like it's a hat. Oh, you know what I was thinking? That would make an excellent costume for Halloween. I don't know if you're all out there looking for Halloween costumes or thinking you want to dress up something ocean, but how fun would a flower hat jelly be? You can just make a flower on your head and say you're a flower hat jelly. Excellent. You can take that one. I'll let you have it. But it kind of looks like a hat, and then all those tentacles kind of look like a flower, like it's kind of branching off. I think we do have another picture of a flower hat to see a little bit of that pink and different color when it doesn't look like it's glowing. But this is just a different type of jelly. So as I mentioned before, they come in all different shapes and sizes. Now some jellies, their stingers are stronger than others. Like I said, you could touch the moon jellies. It just kind of depends on that type of jelly. Excellent. So take a look. So these jellies, they are able to fluoresce. So they have these chemicals in their body. When certain lights are shown on them, they'll glow blue like we saw in the other one. But when lights aren't shown on them, they're not making that chemical reaction. We see here that this is the same type of jelly. It's also a flower hat, right? The shape of the body is similar. Those tentacles are similar. It's got the little bit of yellow and green, but we see some more pink and less blue on this jelly. But still the same type of jelly, still a flower hat jelly. So this is another type of jelly. I don't know if we have them currently here at the aquarium, but we have had them here in the past. Pretty neat to see all these different jellies. So let's take a look. We've got a couple more minutes. Let's take a look at another type of jelly that we have here at the aquarium or that we maybe have had at the aquarium. Jellies are pretty fascinating. I like to think that they're a very simple and very complex animal at the same time because they're very simple, right? They don't have a lot of structures to their body, right? They're missing a brain, they're missing a heart, they're missing a spine, but they're able to survive off of so little, and that makes them really complex to think about how they're able to survive this way. So they're a very interesting animal because they're both simple and complex at the same time. Ooh, interesting. I think this one is an egg yolk. Excellent. This one's called an egg yolk jelly, and I'm going to have us take away that lower third so we can take a look at the bottom part of this jelly. Excellent. All right, so let's take a moment and make some observations. Yeah, so this one looks kind of white. It's kind of similar color to that moon jelly, except for this spot right here. What does that look like? An egg yolk. Yeah, that's how we get its name. It's egg yolk jelly because of that kind of yellow in the middle that looks like the yolk of an egg. So this jelly, you can see, it kind of looks a lot more chaotic here. There's a lot of tentacles and a lot of oral arms going all over the place. And that's just how some jellies are. Some have really long tentacles and oral arms. Some have really short. Some have stringier or thicker. Just depends on the type of jelly. So lots of different types of jellies. Now, one thing I do want to touch upon before we say goodbye is the life cycle of jelly. It's another thing that makes this animal really interesting, and it kind of ties us back to talking about that plankton that starts as plankton or versus changes. So jelly life cycles are really interesting because, as I think I mentioned towards the beginning, jellies actually start their life attached to a surface. So the way that jelly life cycle works is once a jelly hatches from an egg, it attaches to a surface. So it's not free floating or wandering the way that we saw our jellies, or we might think of most jellies moving. It's actually attached to a surface. And then It grows and it grows and it grows, and then eventually it branches off. I'm going to hold on for one moment. So we have a picture right here. Just want to make sure we had the right picture. So this image here shows us the drawing of their life cycle. So here we've got the egg right here, and then the larva hatches from the egg, and then it looks like this, where it's kind of attached. It almost looks like a little bit of a plant, but this is attached to a surface, and these parts are growing, and then they grow to look like this. And then you can see all these things stacked. Now this is not one jelly, this is a bunch of jellies stacked together. So this is a jelly, and this is a jelly, and this is a jelly, and this one, and this one. And as they grow a little bit, they then branch off. We've got to pop off. And then we've got this stage of the jelly's life, which we kind of saw when we looked at that plankton video before, which we'll bring up in just a moment again. But that plankton video, we saw those little, they're called ephyra. They're like little baby jellies moving around. And it almost looks weird because they've got all these kind of spaces, but eventually they kind of merge together and show this jelly that we see here. So I'm going to have Courtney put us back in the studio for a moment and then bring up that plankton video that we were looking at before, and we're going to see if we can spot that ephyra moving around. So their life cycle is very interesting because unlike most other plankton, who are either plankton and then not, or plankton their whole life, they're almost not, and then they turn into plankton. So let's see, just before we say goodbye, if we can spot those ephyra again. Now this is taken from a water sample. So what's really interesting to think about, when you go into the ocean and you're swimming out in the water, you're actually swimming probably with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tiny little animals that you can't see and you don't know are there. And that's totally fine. Plankton lives in the ocean. They feed a lot of animals. They're important for us to have, but it's just kind of cool to think about. You're swimming with animals that maybe you didn't even realize you were swimming with. So let's see if we can spot those ephyra, those little jellies. Got lots of copepods, some other types of plankton. Ooh, some that look like they're zooming around. It's like a little zoo in here. Looking for that ephyra. So we do have a picture, but I want to see if we can spot it again moving across, and then we'll go into that picture. I know now we're just like waiting for it. But it is kind of cool to see all the different types of plankton. There are thousands of different types of zooplankton. Oh, I don't know if that one was an ephyra or not. Maybe it was. Kind of looked like a shrimp almost. But we know we do have one coming up because I saw it before. I'm determined. Being very stubborn right now. I want to see that ephyra swimming by. I might lose hope in a moment. But hopefully we'll see it. Got lots of other copepods and things. Where are you, little ephyra? All right, I'll give it like 10 more seconds, and then we'll just look at a picture of it. All right. I was thwarted by the ephyra. Let's take a look at a picture of an ephyra. So we're going to take a look at a picture of one, but maybe another time we can look through that image again or that video and see if we can find the moving ephyra. They're really cool. They're interesting. It's interesting to think about how this animal changes its body from the sort of spread out, almost star-like thing. Here we've got some more little planktons. And these things right here, these are all the ephyra. They're so tiny. This one's a good one. You can kind of see how it's kind of splayed out. And then when they move, they look like they're working really hard. And then eventually they continue to eat and grow and they turn into the jellies. All right, everyone. I'm going to have Courtney put us back in either coastal corner or into our jelly, some animals that we talked about today. Excellent. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. Remember, if you have any questions, you're welcome to text us in at 562 286-1838, or you can email us at live@lbaop.org. And stay tuned, because even though this is recording, we do have another program that will be airing after this recorded one at 10 a.m., and that is our Spanish programming with Cynthia, and we would love to have you join us then. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.